Hello everybody, it's Hater. Welcome back to another Destiny 2 build video. And last week when Season of the Haunted released, we recently talked about a build over here using the new Warlock Snap melee and Sunbracers so that you can throw a lot of solar grenades and just apply a bunch of Scorch everywhere. That build, in and of itself, is phenomenal. I love everything about it. But as I've been doing the brand new dungeon duality, the Starfire protocol has caught my attention, because after banging my head against Galron over and over and over again, this exotic not only changed up my build, but my playstyle, and actually secured my first solo kill. But why Starfire protocol? Why is it so good all of a sudden? And to answer that, pretty much the stars aligned for it with Solar 3.0. Starfire Protocol's exotic perk allows you to have 2 fusion grenades, and when you deal, and I want this bold and underlined, Malfenic, enhanced weapon damage, it will recharge your fusion grenade, and when you get a kill with your fusion grenades, it completely fills your rift energy. Specifically, that one line of text means you can gain your fusion grenades back indefinitely as long as you are standing inside of a well of radiance or your empowering rift. Pair that with something like the exotic grenade launcher Witherhoard, and now you have a permanent DOT effect that is going to refill your fusion grenades. Speaking of which, fusion grenades are no joke now because of Solar 3.0. The new aspect, Touch of Flame, is now going to allow them to explode twice instead of once. And because fusion grenades now apply the Scorch effect, this means after the second explosion, they're pretty much guaranteed to proc the Ignite effect and deal even more damage. For a better, clear understanding of how this damage actually works, I took it to Phrygia in Grasp of Avarice and ran a full damage test against him. Starting from the moment that the crystal finishes charging, I lay my Well of Radiance and I lay Witherhoard on top of him. Afterwards, I start throwing my grenades. 1, throw in the linear shot, 2 grenades, shoot more linear, another grenade, reapply Witherhoard, and then I just keep repeating this. So far, 4 grenades, 5 grenades, 6 grenades, more linear bullets, 7 grenades, another Witherhoard, more linear, another grenade, more grenades, and it just keeps coming. Afterwards, I do lay my empowering rift, and then that's the end of the damage cycle. But after jumping off though, we were able to secure 1.66 million damage in one damage cycle. Something that I will admit though is that it was a little sloppy, but it is still a good representation of how good this build can perform in a DPS scenario. But for the actual build itself, let's break down what I'm using, starting with my subclass. And for starters, with the aspects, of course, we're using Touch of Flame as I mentioned earlier, but when it comes to your second slot in the aspects, this mostly comes down to preference if you want Icarus Dash for more mobility or Heat Rises for more consistent melee energy while you're gliding. As for the fragments, starting from the left, I really like using Ember of Torches so that any melee attack we make, either the Celestial Fire or the Snap, it will make us empowered with the Radiant buff. However, from my understanding though, this Radiant buff doesn't count towards Starfire Protocol, so it's just extra damage in the middle game when we're not using the burst. For the next fragment, we're using Ember of Ashes. This is pretty self-explanatory. It increases the amount of Scorch stacks enemies take when we apply them, meaning more ignition procs in the long run. Then because we're using Ember of Torches, we're going to pair the fragment Ember of Solace with it. This is going to increase both Radiant and Restoration effects to us, making Radiant last up to 15 seconds and Restoration last upwards to 12. And then the final fragment I'm pairing with this build is Ember of Searing. This is just a little extra so that I can have until the new fragments come out, but this allows us to gain more melee energy whenever we defeat a Scorch target. Speaking of which, for the fragments I would use when they are out, both Ember of Char and Ember of Empyrean are going to be my go-tos when we're able to use them. Ember of Char is going to make it where whenever our fusion grenades proc ignition, it's going to spread Scorch stacks to enemies in the nearby radius. Then Ember of Empyrean is going to extend the duration on both Radiant and Restoration effects whenever we get a kill with both solar weapons or solar abilities, meaning we could have infinite Radiant and infinite Restoration when this fragment comes out. Overall though, Feel free to use whatever fragments you're comfortable with. They're not really meant to be the stars of the show. For the mods of the build, however, let's go over to the armor and break down what we're using. And the first thing I want to make clear is I don't have access to both Classy Restoration or Solar Fulmination. Both of these mods are going to help synergize and make this build feel so much better than it already does. This is why I talked about Ember of Empyrean earlier, because you could pair that with Classy Restoration. So every time that you lay your Empowering Rift, you gain so much healing to the point that you just cannot die anymore. And then kills while you have the Restoration active are just going to keep extending it. As for Fulmination, this is going to increase the damage on our ignition effects. So having both the 6-cost Classy Restoration and the 3-cost Solar Fulmination at the same time, you're gaining constant healing and the ability to use your Amp Rift in higher tier content, and even more damage with your fusion grenades. When we get to my class item, I'll break down what I'll change out here so I can fit them in. But to start off with your armor energies, you're going to have at least 3 of your armor pieces be solar, and then 1 of them be arc. I do recommend that you have your chest piece as your arc piece, and I'll explain why when we get to it. Starting off over at the helmet though, this is the armor piece I have as any energy of my choosing, and I'm using the mod Elemental Ordnance at the end. Elemental Wells are going to be the name of the game with this build, and this is going to create a solar elemental well every time we get a kill with our fusion grenade. Moving now down to the arms, this is the first piece of armor that I have solar, and we're using the mod Bountiful Wells. The whole point of this mod is that it's going to double up on elemental wells that all of our mods create based on how many we have equipped. If we have 1 elemental ordnance equipped into our helmet, it creates 2 elemental wells. Vice versa for any other mod in this build. And then next to it, I'm pairing it with overload rounds since I am using an SMG in my loadout. This is both good for overload champions, but it also reduces the damage that enemies deal to me when I'm spraying them with an SMG. Next up, moving over to the Starfire Protocol, this is the reason why I recommend that you have it as Arc. The brand new Armor of the Dying Star artifact mod. This is going to allow you to reduce damage taken by both solar and void energy at the exact same time for only a 2 cost. You pair this with an arc resistance mod, and now you're taking reduced damage from all 3 elements. And then to take advantage of my armor piece being arc, I'm using Seeking Wells. This is more of a preference mod. You could pretty much use any other mod that you want. You can even add an extra elemental ordnance or a melee well maker here. This just allows elemental wells that I create travel across the ground and come to me instead of me going to them. Moving on over to the boots, this is my second armor piece that I have solar, and we're using the mod Well of Life. If this build already didn't have a bunch of healing, this adds even more to it, because on top of Classy Restoration giving us restoration for a constant period of time, we can pick up a solar elemental well and have even more constant healing because the 2 stack. Pair that with really high resilience and Ember of Empyrean, as I mentioned before, and you practically become an unkillable fire-slinging god. Finally now though, moving down to the class item, this is my final armor piece that I have solar. Over in here, I'm using Explosive Well Maker. This is going to create a solar elemental well every time we get kills with explosive damage in general. This means the puddle that Witherhoard lays, our ignitions, our fusion grenades, and our melees, all of these will be a source to create elemental wells. And then Bountiful Wells, as previous, will also double up on this and create 2 instead of 1. However, as I mentioned earlier, we still need to fit in Classy Restoration into this slot. That's where it gets a little weird, because not only is Classy Restoration a 6 cost, Solar Fulmination is also a 3 cost, and they're both class item mods. So to make this work, I would probably have to cut a mod out of my build. More than likely, I would take Bountiful Wells out of my arms and put Explosive Well Maker in there, and then drop everything here and fit both Classy Restoration and Solar Fulmination into it. Other than that, I think that's going to be the build for today's video. I tried something a little different with the intro this time, made it a little shorter, segued in very quickly. Let me know down in the comments if you guys like that kind of format moving forward. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask me over at my Twitch, which is down in the description, or you can ask me here down in the comment section. And if you made it this far in the video, thank you. Seriously, it really helps out the algorithm down in the long run. Also, if you enjoyed the build, consider showing some support by giving the video a like and subscribing so you'll be up to date whenever a new build video comes out. Either way, I hope you all enjoyed the video. I'm going to catch you in the next one. Bye bye.